Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Capito.
Yes, thank you all for your opening statements. And Secretary Wriston, I wanted to ask about when we were negotiating the surface transportation reauthorization in this committee, we talked a lot about greenhouse gas performance measures, and we decided not to give the FHWA that authority. But they have now, FHWA has released a proposed rulemaking to establish a greenhouse gas emissions performance measure requiring states to set declining targets. So for our state, I guess what is your reaction to that? Have you seen that? And then what kind of measures, since we have a diffuse population, obviously our emissions are going to be a lot less, and so to improve those is going to be more difficult for us. That's the way I see it. How do you see this?
Here we go again. The law's clear. That provision's not in it. Transportation is not opposed to working toward reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Of course we're not. We're going to do anything and everything we can, which is exactly why the flexibility that's ingrained in the formula programs are so important. To be able to flex just the carbon reduction program when the rules told us clearly that we could flex up to 50% of that bucket to a more flexible category. And we did in West Virginia. The FHWA's division offices they run the gamut with guidance on that across the country with the 52 DOTs. Some states were told they could, some states were told they couldn't. Ours was approved for 3 months while everyone else was still hearing that it couldn't be done. The greenhouse gases, the DOTs are absolutely, we're not opposed to this, but we need the flexibility to do things that'll get a result. By moving that money into a different bucket, you gave me the flexibility to take a holistic approach, to look at the overall environmental concerns and put together comprehensive plans to address them. Yes, we're going to have to use a little innovation. We're going to have to use some technology to deliver these things, absolutely. But transportation is not the worst offender in the world with greenhouse gases, and we can take care of a portion of this. Transportation is not the solution to zero greenhouse gases. It's just not true, and it's never going to be true. We can work on this. We need flexibility to do it. A firm performance measure? Absolutely not. The minute you give me a performance measure, you're telling me up front, you're going to set a bar, in many cases arbitrarily, and I'm going to have to move that needle over time, or I'm going to get a penalty somewhere.
Right. So it's consistency. I mean, I think that's what we're hearing. So, Mr. Tymon, what are you hearing since you hear from all different? I think the consistency, actually, we emphasized this last week with the nominee, to say that one state says yes, one state says no on exactly the same types of provisions or requirements. What are you hearing at the sort of in a more general sense on this issue?
On the greenhouse gas?
Greenhouse gas or the inconsistency of the district directors?
Well, I would say just for maybe first on the greenhouse gas emissions, you know, the rulemaking is currently pending. We're putting together our comments. We have states probably all over the map on this. We have several states that will support it and a lot of states that will be opposed to it. We as an organization were opposed to it during the Obama administration when they came out with this provision. Mainly because, again, it wasn't spelled out in the law that this is something that they should do. And with this one, I think we clearly have concerns about, as Secretary Wriston mentioned, the declining targets, I think, is a problem. That's an approach that's not used in any of the other performance measures that we have. And then, again, the ability for state DOTs to be able to influence this specifically. I agree with Secretary Wriston. Every state in the country wants to do everything they can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but state DOTs are probably limited in how they can impact this reduction specifically. Overall, I do think that it is a concern that we do seem to get different guidance from state to state on different issues. I think this example on the transferability of certain funds from different programs really came to light this summer. Several states had asked their division offices for the ability to transfer funds. Some were told yes, some were told no. Some were told yes, but then were sent a stern letter saying that they shouldn't do it. So that is a concern for us. We've communicated that with FHWA and USDOT. They're aware that that's a concern.
Okay, good. Thank you. On the guidance, I only have a little bit of time left, but on the guidance that was put out by the FHWA in terms of the memorandum that really discourages new construction. You want to go to maintenance, you want to go to transit, you want to go to bike paths and other things of that nature. How does that impact? Is that impacting you, Secretary Wriston? Or, I mean, are you actually seeing it impacting your ability to get approval for certain projects?
Well, it certainly is. I have many of these projects with the preliminary designs done, particularly in bridges. If I can't, if I need to add a sidewalk arbitrarily to a bridge, whether I need it or not, then I have to go back to the design and literally redesign the steel that holds that bridge up. It has to be resized. Conversely, going the other way, if I can't add capacity to my interstates, well, what am I doing to the next generation if I spend tremendous resources on a resurfacing job on I-79 in West Virginia and don't take care of the added capacity I know I'm going to need in 12 or 15 years? It makes planning impossible.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you all. And I want to kind of end the question on, it's related to the Bumblebee, but we had the Director Williams from Fish and Wildlife came to West Virginia, spent a whole day with us. We spent some time with Secretary Wriston. We spent some time with our DEP and then with some of our stakeholders. And I appreciate her visit very much. But it became very apparent that we got a communications problem here, and that's at this point it was Fish and Wildlife. But what really struck me in terms of the one federal decision provisions that have been in effect for a while, we simply codified them in this last bill because we know that'll save time and money and hopefully have these concurrent reviews. But, you know, it was almost like, well, Fish and Wildlife has this review, and then, well, we got Corps of Engineers over here, and then we got Federal Highway Administrator here, and then we have West Virginia DOT here, and then we have West Virginia Environmental Protection here, and it just seemed like it was a ping-ponging of responsibility. And a lack of communication and not getting to the approvals that you need to get these things moving forward. So, Secretary Wriston, one federal decision, Mr. Tymon talked about it a little bit. Is it actually in effect in your mind? Because now we're talking about if a permitting bill comes up, one of the bases of this permitting bill, we think, might be that one federal decision would be extended to energy projects, grid projects, and all of these other things. We're the test case here in transportation. Is it working? Is it a reality? And what are the problems? Or what are the good things about it?
Well, the good things, it's obvious. It is the framework for the FHWA to be the single point and to be the clearinghouse, if you will. As a Secretary of Transportation, when I assign someone a project, the first thing I do is put somebody in charge, somebody I can hold accountable. And that's what we have to do with this process, is put somebody in charge. You ask if this is working? Absolutely not. It's largely been ignored. We have had discussions at meetings that the acting director was at. There doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency to enact this or to even discuss it very much. The key to this provision in the law is going to be to act quickly and get it in place and address these processes. We have to rebuild trust between the states and these federal agencies. And you're right, the communication is awful. It's a recipe for failure. We have to address these communication issues. And if we can't do that, then we're going to have a predictable result. We're not going to like it, but we're going to have a predictable result. But no, it's absolutely not working. If we are going to wait 2 years into the program to do something that we need on the front end of everything we're doing, how does that make any sense whatsoever? Once again, there's a federal inconsistency there. We've got to do better. We've got to close those communication gaps.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the purpose of the hearing really today, is for us to say, you know, these provisions of, you know, as you said in your opening statement, which I thought was very, very impactful, when you say, you know, we've got a chance here. I mean, you've been around a while. We've got a chance here that you've never seen. And because we have the money. It's not just the time, it's the money, and we also have the will of Congress and of the president to move forward on these things. And I know our governor certainly is very active. He wants to build, or he wants to fix and maintain, and I know you got a lot of pressure that way. But if we don't, if we wait to the back end, well, we're going to end up wasting money, number one, because we're going to end up approving things that maybe wouldn't have gotten approved if they'd had the full vetting, because you know how it is. You start to run out of money, so you get a little bit panicky, and you go, okay, we'll do that, and then you find out 2 years later, that wasn't a good idea. And that's how you get, you know, 1.5 miles of Route 35 built, and it stays like that for 25 years until you completed it, thank you very much, just this last year. So I'm very concerned about this because we want to move these projects. We don't want to skirt any of the environmental laws, absolutely. We don't want to endanger a species, but we want to have common sense. So I think communication is, I was impressed to hear that the Secretary of Transportation in Delaware doesn't have the same problem. So maybe this goes to that, you know, that inconsistencies that we've heard about in the hearing. One state can work very well, one state not so well, and then you get inconsistent opinions, and you don't want to go one way if you're not sure in 6 months you're going to get pulled back. For instance, you had the right to be flexible with your funding. You got the funding flex that you wanted in West Virginia, and then you get a letter 3 months later saying, you shouldn't be doing that. You know, that makes no sense, and you wonder, is the right hand talking to the left hand? So my thing is, I think this one federal decision is the best way to go, but it has to be implemented, and it has to be, and we, I think, are responsible for the oversight to make sure this is happening. So hopefully, if we get somebody in place at Federal Highways, that will, because when you don't have anybody in charge, as you said, when you don't have anybody in charge that's really accountable, it makes it more difficult to hold them accountable. So thank you all very much. I'm going to have to run, but I did appreciate everything, and I want to thank my West Virginians for coming across the mountain. Appreciate it. Thank you. On those beautiful roads.